Hi, good morning and welcome to Boom, It's on the Blockchain. My name's Alistair Caithness and we're here in San Diego and we're just about to bring in our co-host Garrett. Hi Garrett, how are things?
Doing good.
Doing good. How's the weather in Austin?
Hot as usual.
Hot as usual, hot as usual. Well, we're just bringing our guest today, and today we're going to speak about blockchain and education. So let me just bring to the stream Principal Z. We'll put you in the middle. Hi, how's it going?
How's it going, gentlemen? Honor and a
Very-
privilege to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So, just to kick things off, just to give a bit of background before we go into your proposal with the book, just a background about yourself then.
Yeah. So I grew up in multiple education systems in the Waldorf system and international baccalaureate, and I studied in France, and I got to experience a few different styles of learning and see that there's really great we know how to teach already. There's nothing to, it's just a matter of getting that style of education to everyone. And that became my life's work. And I started as a physics and robotics coach and then became a high school principal and turned around a school. It's a school for struggling kids that were kicked out of other schools. And we did it using media. The kids would get, if you can't read or write, you can still host a podcast. And the kids that couldn't read or write were the best podcast hosts because they listened carefully and they covered up their, challenges by being really smart. And so we just started to see results in ways that nobody had seen before. And now we're taking it to scale with an app called HS.credit. So yeah, that's kind of my life's journey as it relates to this stuff.
Wow,
Okay,
that's incredible. I've always had a tremendous respect for, the educators that go out of their way to do this kind of stuff. There was recently, there was somebody I knew 10 years ago that she worked for Peter Thiel doing like the, Thiel Foundation Fellowship. And I had no idea. Her name is Danielle Strackman, and she founded Innovations Academy in San Diego. So it's very interesting and I have a profound respect for people that do that. Cause I had a lot of struggles in school and I ended up going for online school and I did online high school and college. So.
Right. And why not? I taught a robotics program. These kids took first place in the city and went to nationals against all the private and public schools, but they didn't get any credit for that. Right. This is stuff that they should have gotten a lot of credit for. It's an entrepreneurial thing. You have to build a team, and there's a lot that goes into winning that kind of thing. It's a social construct. So yeah, I totally agree with you that options like online and just having us start changing the direction of flow information from it coming from us to them to more listening to the kids and seeing how they think.
Yeah, because it's interesting that you did the stuff with robotics because I when I was in 5th grade, I won like the National Science Fair for a little robotics project I did with Lego Mindstorms.
Yeah.
And I went all the
So
way.
we were the
to
130-pound,
yeah,
saws and drills version of that.
Big stuff. I forget what they call
First robotics. Yeah.
First. Yeah, I almost did that, but by the time I got to middle school, they didn't have any of the funding. They didn't do any of that stuff at the school. So I hated school because they didn't have robotics. So that's awesome.
That's where the ideas that ended up in the book started, is a first robotics team. And actually, one of the students who was 13 and a leader of the first robotics team is now the CEO of HS Credit. He's 35 years old. He's been a mechanical engineer and became an executive in business. So yeah, it all comes full circle.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
So if you, Principal Z, so if you think about the current education system, who does it work for and who doesn't it work for? So if we go to the basis of it.
Yeah, it works for nobody because it works for the past, for the industrial age, for factories, for robots. It works for a time that we wanted to use people as robots. But now we have robots to use as robots. And so we don't have to teach kids how to think from multiple options and a drop-down menu and short answer response. That kind of standardized thinking and standardized testing doesn't serve anybody.
So, but then generally people are going through sort of educational systems anyway, and they are coming out the other end, and some people are going into life and succeeding, highly skilled. But what is this percentage getting smaller with the current education system, or what's actually happening that you see that's changing with it?
Yeah. So there's a evolution coming to education. We all see it, and we're hopefully going to play a small part, or but it's happening regardless. And it's the same thing that happened to business with inversion, that happened to banking with blockchain. It's this user first approach, this decentralized approach, when instead of bricks and mortar, you're talking about digital stuff, things change. And so that work that I talked about that I did since 2003 with audio and video, now we call it NFTs. It's the same thing I was doing with them. They were making media for the school, and then I was awarding them credit for it. And if you think about a high school transcript, it's a ledger, just like Bitcoin is a ledger. And so what's coming to the schools is, for example, high school credit, among many other things, where now we're looking to be the most trusted data source for the end of the K through 12 journey. So we're just 11th and 12th grade we're evaluating with high stakes data. We have these credit experts who get paid $150 an hour on our app to grade the work. And so it's high stakes, but performance-based, not standardized, performance-based. And this is ancient teaching methods on how our brain naturally learns best and releases dopamine when we challenge ourselves and invest energy and get that return and dopamine in our heads and get more excited to do more of it. It's triggering that cycle that right now we dampen in kids, because for the industrial age, we wanted to leave our humanity at the door to be robots, right? And we wanted to sit in cubicles and, work in factories. That's just ending. Now we're our own consultants for our own brands, and it's a much more holistic way of thinking, which comes back to a more holistic way of learning. So it's what's coming to education is the private school education that used to be spotted around the country carrying these ancient practices of intergenerational transmission of knowledge is now coming to everyone, because everyone will have access to the same types of evaluation. And it's really the evaluation that drives education.
So how does it so then think about how your app, to explain to people how your app actually works, because you spoke about it briefly, dumb it down for people out there just to understand how it works, and so they can put it into sort of concept for them.
Yeah, so for an audience that might understand Bitcoin, if some of you do, it's the same thing that happened there, where we took from the banks and the governments the power to print money, and we put it in the hand of a decentralized community of miners, and plus the users and plus the developers. We're doing the same thing now for educational credits, whereas before they would be driven by these 4-year cycles for each election cycle, and it really corrupted. It took the focus away from the kids and onto the adults. We're now putting the definition of a credit into the hands of a community of educators who stay focused on the kids. And what comes out is something that I think is very valuable. We call it academic capital. It's data about which kids in which neighborhoods and which locations with which schools are learning to tell signal from noise, are learning to see how they think and think about how they think, so that they can see how people are manipulating how they think, right? That critical thinking, that taking multiple perspectives, the meeting people and having discussions with people who don't think like us and getting to steel man their arguments. That kind of education, the old school education, is what we measure with these performance-based assessments on the platform. So we're just a gold standard data source for academic data, evaluating 11th and 12th grade students only. We're just a ledger. We're just a transcript. Everything gets done off platform. We're not Coursera. We don't offer courses. Teachers off courses in schools. They're already doing that. We're not going to try to replace that. And the teachers that are offering project-based courses will get to come onto our platform and have a chance to become one of these credit experts that get paid $150 an hour to grade incoming work. So they're grading each other's work in committees of 3. And we start having gold standard academic data, just like digital gold is Bitcoin. The digital gold in educational data is high stakes, performance based. That's all it is.
So if you think of high school students going into your system, how does this credits work if they want to go into further education with universities? Does it help them, or what happens next?
So we have a few universities that have already reached out to us and want to be early adopters. Our feeling is that the universities, they're not going to be the first to adopt. There's going to be a group of kids. We have 20 of them starting in September, and then they're going to grow. If that community of kids grows and the amount of content on the site grows, then we can show the content to people. And it's such high. I've been doing this for 20 years. The stuff these kids produce will make you cry. It's going to sell itself. So we're first developing the library of student work with these early student investors who are incentivized with crypto, and they're going to be part of our community to help grow this. So they're not our first target audience. Our target audience right now is kids, and making sure they adopt it and they love it and they get value from it. And so like those robotics kids, that they can actually get credit from that work, but they have to do some metacognitive pieces, where the editing piece, and get it down to 10 minutes. So that editing metacognitive work that you do as a podcaster, or setting up an interview so you won't have to edit it, that kind of production thinking is the types of skills you get with project-based learning.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's like everything with the blockchain coming along. It just creates so many opportunities in so many different ways.
Yep.
Our project focuses on tokenization. Garrett's project he's been focusing on carbon emissions and tracking carbon emissions to granular level. And this is now just going into education, so it's just, and education's changing anyway, because I think US education compared to, I'm originally from Scotland. So in Scotland, everybody gets to do their first degree for free. So you get when I was going back to university back in the 90s.
You get more than one.
Yeah, you get the second one, and it's obviously it's if you're from there, you do not have to pay the money that people are here to do a second degree or master's courses, etc. When I was doing back in the 90s, you were actually getting paid to go. So if you look at places like Germany in their education system, again, it's a free education system. You've got people from America now realizing it's cheaper to go and do an engineering degree in Germany than it is to do an engineering degree in America. And the way the Germans look at it is like a labor force. So, they're looking at their labor force and they're investing in their labor force, where you come to the American system, whereby the universities are making such huge amounts of money, and the kids are coming in and they're saddled with debt coming out the other end of $200,000-$300,000.
Imagine those that don't graduate. So now they've in debt without the degree.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So that's a lot of them too. Many don't make it.
Yeah.
And then you look at someone like University of Phoenix, whereby, that's the one the military have been using. So it's a sort of online degree. And this is sort of taking that online degree and sort of taking it a step forward into inner education, but actually expanding the whole thing rather than just saying you're going to learn this thing digitally. It's how it breaks down from there as well. So where do you see the future of this going then, Principal Z? How is it going to be in 10 years from now?
That's great. So if you look up something like authentic learning on Wikipedia, it describes it very well. That's what the high school experience will be. It'll be these memories that you'll never forget. Each one will be captured as an NFT with a video or podcast related to it. And as an administrator, this made me look good. Everybody envied my data because people would come audit me. And at other schools, they would get a attendance sheet to show that somebody got a course. I would show you the freaking work the kid produced, and you'd cry at the end of it, right? So auditors treated me differently. So in a few years, this is just going to slowly take over, just like all these other decentralized technologies. We will start. Our intention is to have everyone trust our data the most. And if that's happening at the end of 11th and 12th grade, then the other classes in America, I know America and I only know high school, but in our system, then you don't have to teach to a test. You start teaching to real life experiences. And then at the end of high school, the last 2 years, you should be out in the field as a reporter, as at doing your work, producing these 20 credits that are our transcript. And before that, you should be preparing. But what happens is then in the last 2 years, as you're letting out of the school system, you don't need too many teachers to manage that. You need some feedback sessions, you need some editing space and tech support, but you don't need that much if they're ready for it to so that you can focus the resources and your teachers on the 9th and 10th grade. So like just designing a high school will start being toward these project-based learning where it's student-centered and the students are doing homework that is questions they're asking, not the question the teacher asked, right? And it's stepping back and focusing on, okay, what skills are the kids practicing and are they academic, but letting them go into areas that they're interested in to then report and teach us. And the content will also be a hugely valuable part of our platform. And so that what's coming in the next few years is the hyper-local media market, which is now dead. There's no competition. High school kids are going to infiltrate that market quickly and start producing really amazing hyper-local media. And that media will be earning them credits. So it's going to have been revised multiple times by a teacher. It's going to be academic. It might be more reliable than CNN, right? Because somebody's actually checking them. And so that content is something that I think I can't predict what that's going to turn into, what that looks like. And then a step further than that, if we take it 10 years, and this has been adopted, I think that academic capital and this data will be a leading indicator of which communities are going to do well in a digital age. And so it'll be kind of like with GDP numbers, we'll hear about the academic data. And I think that's really for a digital age, that knowing how to tell signal from noise will determine if you're going to get manipulated by Russian bots or if you are going to be writing, the bots to get people to get attention your way. Are you going to be creating content or consuming content? I think we'll start being able to measure these things with academic data. And that I think is really exciting. And I can barely imagine what we do with that.
Yeah, that is pretty amazing to think that, So let's think about the local media. So how's that actually going to work? Is this going to be a point whereby essentially people become their own reporters with their phones, uploading content of the news that's happening in real time in the area they're living or
Yeah.
of what they're seeing?
Yeah, I think they'll be telling stories. Their grandparents are like intimate local stories around. So it'll be different subject areas. So the science could be involved there. But for science and math, if it's very technical, you can also just learn, geek out on it, so that you can then teach it to the next kids coming in, to the younger kids, and like Khan Academy, but where all the work is by students, right? So I can't even imagine what the kids will start making when we give them, but they'll have to be held accountable to academic. It's very academic. So we're not talking about popularity or even what journalists do, although journalism is much closer to project-based learning than factory work. I think it's a close analogy. But kids are going to create in ways, the kids choose how they want to be evaluated, right? So they choose which rubric to evaluate them by on our platform. That's one of the cool parts. It's all student centered. So they're driving and leading it from, so just the classroom that's driven by young people is very different than a classroom that's driven by, the adults. It's a whole different mindset. And it's hard to even imagine what this will spin into.
Yeah, that is pretty amazing. So how does your app basically lead this forward then?
So we are the repository. We're decentralized. We're a DAO. And we are figuring out how to do this to have a community of educators control and run this, and with a community of students that control and run the incentives piece for students. And we're using tokenomics to do that. So the early kids that participate with us, we hope they will get very wealthy because they were our early investors, because the value on our platform is student media. So we have no value without high quality student media on the platform. And so it's the kids that are our seed investors, we're not funded by anybody. We don't take money from anybody. Nobody, right? We're a bunch of people that do this on our free time and with, and we get donations as a nonprofit. So some people can get paid for their work, but we're really focused on launching an app that focuses on kids and making the economics drive incentives that keep it in the kids' favor and let them, we just have to make something that's good enough to try, so that then the kids and the DAO can improve it over time. So we're just trying to, as quickly as we can, get something into people's hands. We're very solutions oriented. We're all administrators. We've all been in the field at the front lines, and we want something that you can actually use and run with, and we can get the feedback from the kids. So I'm excited for September to December. By January, I'll have the first round of user feedback from the kids, and that's the kids' voice. I can't wait to hear what they say.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
That's awesome.
So how does the token economics work then?
Yeah, we're figuring out some of that. Again, we're just trying to start off good enough to try to get it into running and see how it works. We right now incentivize DAO members with this We Do coin that we created. And it's a pre-mine incentive. And the idea is that the coin launches when we have 80,000 active users. We're saying that's 1% adoption in the US. And we're saying if we hit 1%, we're declaring that we've found some user platform fit and we have something real. Until then, we're not sure. And so at that point, the coin launches and it'll have enough cachet at that point, if you have that many active users, and enough students will be holding it. And what happens then is us founders hold most of the tokens at that point. But right when it flips to a real coin, they only get issued to students as a reward for their work. And so over time, students and then alumni take over the platform from us founders, and then it's in their hands.
So what are you going to issue the coin on?
So
like
yeah,
Ethereum?
I'm a Bitcoin guy myself. I think it's just a different thing than all the others, but it's not ready for us. So right now we're launching on Polygon, and we're gonna write the code in a way that we can switch over to something that's Taproot based when it's ready. But I would like to be built on a Bitcoin sidechain if that technology ever gets there. And I like that it moves slowly, so I'm willing to wait. I don't think 80,000 active users is happening for a few years. At best case, right? Even if we really move quickly, we have connections to hundreds of New York City schools. Myself and the people that founded this, I have retired administrators who were the leaders in this performance-based education for the past 20 years. So we have a lot of schools in New York, and it'll catch quickly in New York. But to get national, I think it'll take something else. And so we have some time before we have to actually launch the coin. Right now, it's a pre-mine that we can just store on a centralized database. We're putting it on Polygon just to start getting in the habit of decentralized practices and wallets. But we really don't need that decentralization for the pre-mine. What we need it for is the actual token that gets launched.
Yeah, I think that's a good choice. I mean, it's, for the purpose you guys are using it for. I mean, it's I don't think it'll matter so much what the technology, the underlying technology is.
We
I
just
mean,
want it to last a long time. 50 years from now, I want you to be able to get your transcript, right? So we have to do something that doesn't change much, that moves slowly.
That's kind of smart though. When you do put it that way, I can understand both sides of the coin.
Right.
So
How can you trust Ethereum when it's changing right now? I mean, Bitcoin's the only thing that's got that slow and steady, and its connection to the energy and eventually the energy industry going into mining. When that happens, I think things are going to happen to Bitcoin. But anyway, I know nothing about finance. I always get it wrong.
Ethereum Classic. I'm feeling something there. That's a little nugget in this one. That's where all the miners are going to be forced to go next month.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and just to give a bit of insight, do you know much about Polygon itself, Garrett?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, me. I've built some stuff on there, and what I love about it as a developer is the fact that I come from Solidity Ethereum background. You just add it as a separate network to your MetaMask wallet, and then you select that network, and you can go to Remix IDE. You can write the same code. You could copy and paste code from Ethereum and deploy it on Polygon, and you get Polygon scan. It looks the same. Avalanche is similar, but I think a lot of people like Polygon better. I personally am a fan of the purple color, and the logo is all right. So yeah, it's a great choice. And the other thing is when you look at I think the ecosystem is where a lot of people like it the most, because I don't think Avalanche NFTs are on OpenSea, but Polygon and Ethereum are both on OpenSea. So that's, you're paying like a penny for every transaction, which is fantastic with the Matic tokens. And it's just one of those things where I see a big opportunity for developers. If you're looking to build something that's not on just a test net, you want to be on a mainnet solution to just pay lower fees. I like it.
Do you know about Arweave?
I don't. Well, no, I've heard of that.
So
I don't know what
PermaWeb.
it is.
So all of our NFTs, because the kids upload this 10 minutes of media, and so what we do is we immediately push it, as long as their teacher approves it. We push it onto Arweave, and Arweave is great because you pay once up front, and then permanently it's up there because we don't have to make changes. This is their permanent credit. We don't want it changing. So you pay for changes. We're not going to make any changes. So we have a permanent link on Arweave to the NFT, which is great. And the Arweave team has been really supportive and great to work with. What we do is use graduate level PhD interns to do a lot of our development work so that they get experience in a 0 to 1 company and we get their experience. And so they also know the cutting edge. Those guys are ahead of everybody. I didn't realize that when I brought them in, but what they lack in experience, they understand in a fast changing marketplace. They're way ahead of all of us. So it's great to have them. And they've been great working with the Arweave team. There was a great connection. They've been supportive of us, which is nice. For a small project to get support from a team is really nice.
Very nice. Absolutely.
So it's like, so for people to understand, it's like a little 10-minute video that you convert to an NFT, and then it's logged on to your essentially blockchain.
So there's a 3-step phase to earn a credit on our platform. It's high stakes, but instead of putting the high stakes like we do with testing at the end, and then you fail and you spend all this time and stress, we put the high stakes at the front end. So a student has to geek out on a topic and convince us that they invested, that they put skin in the game. So the stake is actually the kid stakes something at the beginning. And so that staking phase, they show us what they studied, the articles, the bibliography, and their teacher goes over their notes with them. Then they can open a credit. So that's staking phase. And then there's a pitching phase where the teacher gives them a task and they create a plan, which is the pitch. And then there's the minting phase where they upload the file at the end.
Okay. So it just gives people an understanding that there's so many other use cases with NFTs. Because really, when NFTs are coming along right now, people just look at Bored Apes. They look at images put up there. They see things in OpenSea. They see the trading of these Bored Ape JPEGs, as they say. And we speak with like Snoop Dogg's owning a lot of them. And then they see them wanting to put on their metaverse in terms of you've got a little bit of space in your metaverse. You can put your digital NFT there. But for being a non-fungible token, suddenly there's multiple use cases out there. And again, this is just touching on it with education. And really, I think my oldest son's autistic, Principal Z. So he's got an IEP, which is individual education program. So and he goes to specialist school. So that's my first. So they create a program, and we got him out of mainstream education to go to specialist school. So he's working with occupational therapists, speech therapists, and people who can actually work with his needs. But what it does is when you start to see the individual education program IEP, it allows people to understand that you can create an education system based on your child. And then your child's just essentially getting based against his or her own progress.
Right.
So that's
special
actually
needs,
working.
what they call special needs kids get those IEPs, but every kid should get one of those. It's crazy that they're the only ones that get it. Right. It's what every kid should get.
Yeah, so it's and then also the point I was going to make is when you start to see an operation, it moves away from this standardized testing, and then again that you don't hit a certain amount of credits, you're not able to read to a certain level, you're not able to write to a certain level, therefore you can't pass forward. And back in my day, people were held back a year, back 2 years. This person's not able to write properly, or they're disruptive in class, and quite a lot of these people had to, they had different types of mental health challenges that they had as well. They were just unidentified. And then suddenly it's like, well, this person's slow. They say use words like that. We'll hold them back for a year. We'll make them do the same thing that they've been frustrated with in the last year. Do it again. A year later, they haven't learned anything more. They've not created the system around it. And I think what you're talking about for people back home to understand is it can take this model of IEPs, individual education program, to all children and just blow the whole thing up,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I work a lot with IEPs and the IEP system. I have a ton of experience in that, and yeah, it's those specialized schools. That kind of education is coming to everybody. And the NFT piece, I was very skeptical of NFTs. I'm a Bitcoin guy. I rolled my eyes, but then I would use these 3 letters, and people would understand the work I've been doing for 20 years. So, utility-wise, I had to start using those 3 letters to people that knew what they meant. I couldn't help it because it saved me all this conversation. And so then we start realizing what it is. And now imagine somebody makes a donation to our nonprofit. Well, what if we give them an NFT as a receipt? They can post it and say, hey, look, I'm supporting, and that advertises our nonprofit because, hey, I'm supporting this cause. Here's why I believe in it. They get to show off that they're supporting our cause. Right. So suddenly once I let myself get into NFTs, they're going to be everywhere. And our transcript are these non-transferable NFTs like concert tickets that you can't transfer to, so the kid can't give his friend a credit to help him graduate. So it's even simpler technology that's so powerful, even when it's not transferable, when it's not speculation, when it's not without all that. There's some great use cases for these. So I think the creativity that, what I'm starting to see in the industry, we just can't imagine what's coming with this.
Yeah, oh no, it's unbelievable. They say something like, I think it's like 92% of jobs that, my kid's 7 years old, Phoenix, my youngest one, they don't even exist yet. Right. People can't fathom that these jobs don't exist. You know what I mean? We're moving into this digital world, and what you're talking about is going to blow people away because they understand it. But this is the future. This is what's about to happen. And then,
can you imagine the kids that get to do these credits when they're in their 30s? They're going to be like, man, that stuff that they were teaching me, I get it. And it's relevant now to my success. Right. Imagine that's how we talked about education. Like it was ahead of everybody, like it was leading, and the kids talked about it as a moment they never forget. And education's got to lead the way, because otherwise, no revolution without education. So if you're talking about a Web3 revolution or any revolution you want to talk about, technological, without education, that technological revolution will not happen because people won't understand it and won't adopt right. And so it's, education is going to play a huge role in this. And I think it's really exciting to think that when it flips, it doesn't have to be linear. It's going to suddenly, spot by spot, start catching on. And it all of a sudden goes to a whole different level.
Yeah, and for people out there, there's going to be pushback from all the different types of education systems right now, because essentially when you start any sort of disruption to a model, and there's a lot of money involved in that model, and suddenly you're providing an educational system that benefits the child, benefits the person involved in teaching them, and then suddenly the cost involved is starting to get stripped out of it. It's such a huge changer. It's a bit like the universities here wanting to continue to keep charging premium fees when there's guys like Elon Musk saying, if you don't go to university, even if you don't got a high school education, come in and see me. And, that's not going to hold you back if you want a job at Tesla, so it's like, right, exactly. And he's just saying that. So suddenly people are thinking, well, do I really need to be $300,000 in the hole But then when you're 17, 18 years old, you're basically guided to this process whereby, unless you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, someone involved in business, if you're going to go into the arts, you're going to go into these other types where there's limited jobs, limited opportunities, but you're still getting saddled the same amount of debt. It's only 8, 9 years later when you suddenly think, well, I want to buy a house. Oh, wait a minute, you have to pay back this
We have these kids captive
$300,000.
for 13 years in our education. In 13 years, we can't get them ready to stop information viruses and the value that comes to society if our community doesn't get manipulated by that stuff, right? Like, it's hard to imagine the value there that you were talking about, right? It's unbelievable it's not just that it becomes less expensive. Right now, we're spending exponentially more every year, and even the test scores, which they can't make go up. It's something when suddenly the kids take charge and get fired up and get lit up. Young people have led all the revolutions, and maybe we can transition with a little bit more smooth rather than the previous revolutions, which were so bloody. I hope there's a chance, but I'm not sure I'm optimistic at this point.
Yeah, anything. It's always a slow changer, and it's always. But education finds a way. People learn more. It's just with the online education, it's just helping so many more people. Even with the COVID lockdown, and then they look at all the things that went wrong with education during that point compared to being in the classroom and all the different things. But to a certain extent, so many children still manage to keep learning. And now you're suddenly coming into
some like
the
it more.
classroom. Yeah, and then you can use this in terms of video education, and then it's like, well, wait a minute. And then it was the time they actually did the teaching as well, which I was amazed at, because when it first went in, my youngest son went into class, the same teacher had been teaching the class for basically 35 years the same way. Suddenly we're doing it online on the computers. It was pretty funny. It was going straight to the computer. How can a kid sit in front of the computer for 7 hours a day and be engaged? So suddenly,
most of those special need kids really suffered during the pandemic. It's a rare case that it worked well.
Yeah, well, that was my younger son. He's not special needs, but but I watched both systems working. The advantage of the special needs when it was online, which was they had less people in the class, so they could do more engaging. But then I had to basically essentially be the assistant with my son to do this. But what you started to find is that suddenly they are learning, and they're learning in little snippets. So it's like the classes are 30 minutes, and then they'll do 3 30-minute classes a day, and then the rest you've got to go on and do these online programs. And then we had Crypto Mum on before, and she was involved in education as well. And one of her things she wants to do is to improve the digital avatar for kids as well, because she finds that if they can create their own avatar like they do with, how can they be so engaged in playing Roblox with all their different things for hours, and they're solving a lot of things. If you watch them play Minecraft and you look at this problem solving, 5, 6, 7-year-old kids do, playing a complex game, and they're able to do it and they can keep engaged, but suddenly they go to the schooling and it's like 20 minutes, I'm bored with this stuff. It's the program.
There's some really amazing work being done using avatars and kind of virtual reality where students are interacting as avatars, that they let themselves do some metacognitive work, and they can, instead of acting out conflict as avatars, they can talk through what that avatar is doing, not as themselves. And that being able to direct it to the avatar that's doing these things, even though they're controlling the avatar, opens up this psychological access to talk about and make differences and reprogram ourselves. It's really interesting stuff happening with what happens. And they used this with executives of corporations is where this first started working. And they realized that now that we see how it works, we're starting to learn how to do it in other levels.
Yeah, that is amazing as well. So it's just
to deal with racial issues, deal with trauma, to deal with, lets you deal with a lot of things that you would do in kind of in a therapy setting, but using different tools, kind of like the Roblox that they like, that world.
Yeah, they're so engaged into it. And then, you watch it, and then it's just like, even Malachi, he plays like the Lego games with me, and he'll come and he's so good at them now because, a lot with autism, it's verbal communication is the most difficult thing. So technology for a lot of kids who are on the spectrum with special needs is allowing them to basically essentially do the same with every other kid doing. They're also on devices, they're playing away, they're playing things. But then he comes to me and tries to get me to help his Spider-Man game, Spider-Man Lego, open the door, open this. And And I'm thinking, I can't do anything here. I have to give it back to him because I don't know what to do to complete it. And he's
Yeah.
like 7 years old or 8 years old, and he's able to do that. And then what it's allowing to do is with the avatar thing is that, now you've got people with disabilities, people, traditionally, some of the regulated children coming in, they're operating on a similar level now. So it's opening the door for people to operate together through technology. And that's another thing that's starting to happen, that's starting to become really interesting to people as well,
Yeah, it's fascinating. I grew up in the Steiner, Rudolph, Waldorf schools, and they considered autistic kids on the spectrum as the special kind of, that they had access to a realm that was something, they had a different viewpoint on them, but they are the ultimate in geeking out on something. That's what they're good at, right? So a platform like ours that asks you to geek out on something and then show off your expertise, there's a way with certain types of projects that they can be very successful.
Yeah, it just breaks things down. And then obviously, because it breaks things down, it allows people to, I think it'll allow people, when it comes to understanding mental health, because obviously that's, I'm a mental health advocate. It's like this technology you're talking about that you're starting to bring in by providing education out with the norm. You can affect so many more people on a personal level that suddenly the whole population is just going to be educated at a higher standard because you're no longer pigeonholed like it.
Well, some communities will and some communities won't, and kind of how that works at the bigger macro level will determine some outcomes. But the communities that do learn to do take on this project-based approach will be so strong in a digital context that they'll outperform other communities. And it's so it's just going to be, the cool thing on our app is you can actually, as an alumni, I can put up $1,000 for a particular school and say, at my old school that I went to, I'm putting up $1,000, kids. Any of you earn these credits, I'll buy the tokens off you $1 a piece. Right. So you can actually set up incentives for a city, for a school, for an area to incentivize the kids. So you take the crypto out of the crypto world into the dollar world for them and do that conversion, right? Make an offer in the marketplace for these right now fictitious credits, right? So it allows you to start monetizing, and you can get a tax deduction, right? For if you do it in the appropriate way. We have two ways to invest in our platform. One is tax deduction. One is you want number go up, right? So it's so exciting to have these tools as an educator. And what you're saying is for the kids, which is what we should always be focused on. It's really what matters is for the kids, the experience is of tools that they really benefit from if they have parents and teacher support.
Yeah, exactly. So this should be, because the social interaction piece is obviously key as well. So, in the classroom, the social interaction I still think is important going forward. So it won't just be online at home. This will be happening in school settings where they'll
I'm
be working
against
next
being
to
on screens in general. No, this is just the high stakes portion of academic data. This is just at the end when you upload the final piece. The work that you do to create that, if you make a play or you host an event or you go to a protest and interview politicians or a political campaign during political season and interview people and come ready with questions that you've studied, right? If you do the work, the academic piece, we want to get you out into the real world, interacting with people that are different than you, getting to other zip codes in New York. We're focused on New York. So we really look at forcing the kids to interact with zip codes that are not their own as one of the indicators of success. And so we incentivize that with the coin, is that if you get together with students in different zip codes and all of you earn these credits, you teach them how to earn these credits, then you get the crypto reward. It's about getting out into the world and interacting and using these academic tools to then break down some of the issues you run into, because the world is complicated. It's not just complicated, it's complex. And so that is an experiential thing. You have to live through it. You have to go through it. You have to walk your journey through it. And so we're giving them the opportunity to actually do that, not to, sit down and shut up in rows. And when the bell rings, you move.
Yeah, that's good, because I think that's one of the big fears with people when they talk about, and especially older generation, they think this new technology coming in is going to basically make people more and more insular. But to a certain extent, I agree with you. I think that the technology is going to have the opposite effect, especially when we move to the virtual glasses and we start moving to a point whereby we don't have to be on the phone looking down at the information's popping up in a little glass.
The question I ask people is, do you think a lawyer is more insular than a software engineer? Right. It's the people that were the lawyers that are going to be the insular engineer. Engineers are insular. They like to, sit in a cardboard
Yeah,
box
yeah.
and code 24/7. So there is that thing. And in Japan, there are kids that lock themselves in their rooms and play these games. There are that there's a real fear to be acknowledged there. But it's the people that were already doing that before in the old system in whatever way they did it in the libraries or whatever they did. It's not for the rest of us. Hopefully, if we're educated, we will use these tools to our advantage. And what we love as human beings is being with each other and experiencing real things. That's much more, right? It's much richer, and it triggers that dopamine thing much more than the simplicity of insular.
Yeah, no, I agree with that as
Absolutely.
well. And I think that's key for people to understand is that, as the world's changing and these technology comes in, we just can't continue with an educational system that it was essentially operating in our time. It's
Yeah.
just, it's, you just can't go back in time. I was speaking about it when we were back in Scotland, in Inverness in Scotland. This is like north of Scotland. We were split until we were 11 by religion, because the first period of the day you're either Protestant or you're Catholic, and because we didn't want the Catholics never wanted us to read the Protestant Bible and Protestant Catholic Bible, and the first part of each day was religious education, reading the Bible.
Wow.
You were basically split until you were 11 years old, and then you went to high school. That's like
Wow.
crazy to think that there as well. And now that's come out of it. And I always talk about this, and Mrs. Martin was her name. She taught me the Bible through fear, the old school way,
Yeah.
but we were made to read the Old Testament for the first 45 minutes of the day when we were like 7 years old, 8 years old. No explanation about it, just verbatim doing that. And that was just what we were taught. And you weren't able to question. There was no explanation what you were doing. You hated when it was your turn. It was just after corporal punishment. So she wasn't allowed to rap you on the knuckles with her wooden ruler, which she used to do. She would stand behind you with this wooden meter stick, and you would be sitting reading Deuteronomy. You don't even know what you're talking about. You're
Right.
trying to get the words not wrong. Got a word wrong, the ruler would go down next to you. And that was the way. And that set up how education was throughout the day, because people think, well, that was only the first period, but the rest of the day you were doing maths, you were doing English, you were doing science, you're sitting at your desk, you've got these little wooden desks, you've got your thing, the sharpener, you're told what to do, you're writing what it is, you're either going to get good marks or not. I was good at maths, I wasn't so good at English, so suddenly like that was my subject areas, work in that, you get an A, you get a B, you get a C, and then you'll do okay. And that was basically until we were like 11, 12 years old. And when we got
Right.
11 in Scotland, we went to high school. Suddenly you're getting mixed with the Catholics, But that was the way it was. It was just like, and that was going back 200 years, 300
Right.
years. This is basically how education comes. So to a certain extent, you're talking about changes in education that's just going to
And yeah, look
completely
at how you
flop the
turned out.
model.
I mean, look at how you turned
Yeah,
out. You're talking about lifelong learning. Somehow that fire didn't get put out in you. And
yeah.
podcasters are lifelong learners, all of them, 100%. That's what you
Oh,
are. Yeah.
it's good to go back and think about all this stuff, and you just you start to understand that was the education process. But back then there was nothing. I remember when calculators came out, and you weren't allowed calculators to school, so we had to learn it. It's just like, there's a calculator, but you're not allowed to use it. It's like, well, wait a minute, it's sitting there. We've got, it's arithmetic. You've got to get it right.
Yeah. When
You
I
know,
studied in France, I got a Doug degree. And I did the first year of a Doug degree, and the exam that I had to pass, I was so proud of myself. It was quantum chemistry. It was all linear algebra, really intense math stuff, like 45 pages of math equations. And they give it back to me ungraded because I did it in pencil, not in fountain pen, you know?
It's just, doesn't matter what the answers are. It's just like that. That's amazing. It was just, but then, there's a technology coming along, the basic calculator you weren't allowed to use, and it
Right.
was just suddenly, it's like, well, why can't we use the calculator? And now it's like, why can't we use the internet to ask questions and stuff like
Right.
that? Kids should be taught how to use the internet and find out and become a researcher and research information and
Exactly.
question information, rather than it just being one way, because it works for a very small niche amount of people.
Right.
I
The
think even,
textbook is useless, but making a textbook is very interesting as long as you have them make it,
oh yeah, well, it's not useful. But if you want to learn about that textbook and you can go in and you can see how other people interpret it, it just takes that textbook and takes it to so many different levels.
Right.
It's just like when you think about it like that, whereby, but if you're just getting told this is the textbook, you've got to learn it, this is the way we've got it, you're going to be graded A, B, C, D, E, F, that's it. and it's just like, oh, he's an F, he's useless, failure. A, he's going to be a genius. And then
Exactly.
what, you're 8 years old.
But right now, what's happened is those grades predict nothing. They predict who's going to be the best robots. And so even the wealthy families are getting impacted because they pay and they get the college and they do everything, and these kids fail and stay at home or whatever, can't get out. And it's because they weren't getting educated in actual human learning to develop and be able to take on life. They were getting, spoon fed.
But plus, you talk about, we're talking about the blockchain, we're talking about this disruption to financial infrastructures, we're talking about, Garrett, carbon tracking, so we've got a project that's working on tracking carbon of oil wells down to a granular level. It's just like suddenly that information's available for people there. It's not just a case of, well, the world's creating all these CO2 emissions, that's good, that's bad, we'll just do it in a little 30-second snippet. The president says this. I think he needs to go back and get some education for some of his comments recently about the economy. I saw him in a video yesterday, zero.
Embarrassing.
Zero. It's like, I've only got one word to say to you, zero.
Right.
Is that how many fans
he kept interrupting himself, saying zero.
Yeah, zero. The inflation is down at 8.6%.
People aren't paying zero, but zero.
There's no. I want to thank Putin for not switching off Nord Stream 1. I want to thank the Saudi government for putting an extra 400,000 barrels into the system to bring the oil price down to make that inflation go down. Didn't thank those guys. He just comes out and says zero. It's just like, it's incredible. And then for them not to say it's a recession as well. It's like, I studied economics at university. It's like, 2 quarters of negative growth, that's a recession. Whether you like it or not, that was recession. That's always agreed. If Trump was in charge and you had 2 quarters of negative growth, it would definitely be a recession. Suddenly, you've got people like NPR and all that talking about it. And let's have a debate about why it's not a recession, just because your guy's in charge when it is. And the thing is, it's a recession everywhere.
They're depending. And the funny thing is that the reason they claim is the jobs numbers, which we know to be a lagging indicator, and we know where it's about to hit you in the face. It's like, why even do that? I don't understand what the benefit is of doing that. But the connection to carbon tracking, the connection to putting Bitcoin into these power systems, when the electric company starts using Bitcoin for those times that they're giving away energy or burning it off right now, I think we underestimate the power of what that's going to do to our energy systems. You can already see in Texas where they've deregulated and they've put in these Bitcoin mining systems. It really does things that are unexpected to the stability of the system.
Yeah. There's so much, we speak about renewable energy, like especially off-grid systems as well. It's crazy that we're now in a world whereby you can put solar panels on your roof, and then you create electricity and you sell that electricity to SDG&E for a fifth of the price that they sell it back to you. It's like, wait a minute. So I have to sell it to those guys to give the electricity to the guy next door. But when I come to need it back, but because we're not giving, if they gave everyone a backup battery storage in your house right now, we would all go off grid. And then suddenly there'd be nothing, and then you can just use the grid for manufacturing.
That's a whole rabbit hole. We just, we gave away the patent that we developed for those batteries that last for 30 years to China, our government. Taxpayer dollars developed it, perfected it, and then we gave it. It's an amazing story. And then we gave it to China to manufacture. We gave them everything. Our government, the energy department. I was blown away by this.
It's amazing when you start to think about it, but it comes back to that same thing as you start disrupting a system, and then all these ideas start evolving out, and then suddenly we don't want you to listen. These ideas don't work. It's like they want to push you down, Principle Z. It's just like you've got
and that's why education is going to make we're either going to become a totalitarian corporate, hegemony that already we've had politicians and big business become the same thing. There's no difference between Democrats and Republicans because one claims big business, one claims big government, but it's the same thing. It's the same people. You're really talking about the same thing. And that's that corporate. If we go the corporate route, if Facebook, the number of users they have, if they become the countries, the next superpowers of the world, that's centralized. That's dictatorship. Or we're going to be educated, and people are going to take advantage of tools like AI for themselves to process all the data and to get what they need and program it to work for them, and become aware of how they're being manipulated and have that critical thinking. Education is going to make the difference between whether we go dark or whether we have a chance here.
Yeah. It's definitely a tipping point, especially for information coming in, because people are live in echo chambers now. And if you're on your Facebook echo chamber and they're feeding you news, and they're feeding you just fake news.
Yeah.
People don't even go. They don't even they don't even click in the. It's like it's not Fox News. It's Fox Station News, or well, Fox News is bad enough anyway. But Fox Station News, it'll be something with a little twist. You'll go to. It's not actually Fox News. There'll be some information. The article doesn't actually tell you anything. The title, but people aren't even reading that. They're just seeing this.
They're
snippet
being
of
programmed,
information.
just like we program computers. Media programs human beings. I think Balaji Srinivasan said they're literally being programmed. And if you're not educated, you get programmed. You get used by the bigger forces.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's definitely going down that route, and it's just and as people speak about it, I remember I spent a lot of money a few years ago in Facebook marketing, and at one point they said there was 2 billion people on Facebook in one day, and then I started thinking, how can 2 billion people be in Facebook in one day? It's just like so. Then I started looking at the people that were following our page, and we did this. We do a website called Rebuilding Iraq. It's about contract information out in Iraq. We've been doing it for a number of years, like project information, government information. And then I started looking at all the followers, and every single follower that was liking the page had basically like 5 pictures, 2 posts, 5 pictures, 2 posts, likes a million things, 5 pictures, 2 posts, likes a million things. And just like everyone was the same. It's like, so I'm paying Facebook, and they're talking about fake followers. There's Elon Musk saying how many fake bots are in Twitter, but then how many fake bots are in Facebook? And then I'm just suddenly paying this guy for advertising. And then the weird thing was, it was in the main feed. The minute I stopped paying for my news articles to come in, it just disappear. It's like you're basically, the minute you start paying into these systems, you're stuck paying money. And the minute you come out of paying the money, that's it. You're coming in, and then they'll just keep giving you so many followers but they deem they're not fake followers because you've paid Facebook for them, rather than paying some, some spy bot guy that's there as well. And the prices are pretty. Facebook just charges 10 times as much as the fake other guys,
Right. And if a decentralized alternative comes around, we're not educated enough right now to take advantage of it. We wouldn't even use it. Right. Yeah. We're not, we don't understand the implications of being fed and being programmed. Right. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's amazing there as well. So that's perfect then. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show then, Principal B. It's been an absolute education for Garrett and myself, to see this happening. And then, it's been good for our viewers to learn more about it. And it'd be great to get you back on the show as the project develops going forward.
It won't be me. It'll be the kids next time. But yes, be great to have the kids on the show.
Oh, that would be.
Check us out at hs.credit. No .com, no nothing .credit. hs.credit, like high school.
hs.credit. Perfect. So we'll put that in the show notes as well, so we send it out to people. So that's been great. So, well, thanks again, Principal Z, for coming on.
Thank you. And awesome work. I really commend you for that work, and it's very meaningful. So
it's selfish. I enjoy it myself. But thank you. Yes.
Yeah, and then thanks again, Garrett, for coming on. So, and thanks to everyone out there. You've been watching Boom, It's on the Blockchain. My name's Alistair Caithness. Have a nice day.